International oil prices hit their highest intraday level since 2022 on Thursday, reaching as high as $126 a barrel as the U.S. and Iran show no signs of breaking the deadlock in negotiations and lifting their blockades of the Strait of Hormuz. The price remained elevated but slipped below $115 a barrel by early afternoon in Europe. Meanwhile, the United States announced that it intends to launch an international coalition under the name Maritime Freedom Construct to restart shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran, however, remained defiant as Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei insisted the U.S. had been defeated in the war, rejecting American interference in the strait as both the U.S. and Iran maintain their blockades. The standoff has heavily impacted Iran's economy, with Iranian rial hitting a historic low on Wednesday, trading at 2.1 million rials to the euro. U.S. President Donald Trump has said he has no intention of lifting the blockade, rejecting Tehran's proposal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for an end to the U.S. naval siege of Iranian ports.
A diplomatic row between Ukraine and Israel appears to have reached an end after the unloading of a cargo vessel allegedly carrying stolen Ukrainian grain to an Israeli port was halted. The Ukrainian government said that the grain was stolen by Russia from territories that it occupies through its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Officials claim that the Panama-flagged Panomitis, which had been waiting to dock and unload in Haifa, is carrying more than 6,200 tons of wheat and 19,000 tons of barley. Israeli import company Zipper announced that the vessel will have to find an alternative destination for the goods, while Kyiv said it would continue to track its location and warn against any operations it undertakes. The row between Israel and Ukraine erupted this week after Israeli authorities allowed another vessel with similar cargo to unload at the port of Haifa. Israeli officials denied receiving sufficient evidence from Ukraine and criticized Kyiv for going public with the issue on social media.
Hungarian Prime Minister-elect Peter Mayer has said that EU funds could soon be released to Hungary following a series of high-level meetings in Brussels on Wednesday. Mayer met with European Council President Antonio Costa and Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in their first direct talks since his election victory on the 12th of April. According to Commission President von der Leyen, the pair discussed the steps necessary to unlock EU funds earmarked for Hungary, held up during the premiership of Viktor Orban, a long-standing critic of von der Leyen's presidency. In a social media post, Mayer said that the talks were, quote, highly constructive and productive as he called for discussions to move at speed. Hungary risked losing around 10 billion euros in post-pandemic funds intended to support its economy unless Mayer secures a deal before an August deadline. The Hungarian Prime Minister-elect will return to Brussels for an official visit on 25 May, once in office.
Press freedom has fallen to its lowest level in a quarter of a century, Reporters Without Borders warned on Thursday. The index shows that press freedom is in decline in 100 of the 180 countries and territories it evaluates. In addition, only 7 countries in Northern Europe, led by Norway, have a press freedom situation that is considered good.
Si on mesure en termes de couleur dans la carte du classement mondial, vous voyez qu'au début du classement en 2002, 20% de la population mondiale habitait dans des pays où la situation était considérée comme bonne ou plutôt bonne. Aujourd'hui, ce n'est plus que 1%.
The report also highlights the decline of press freedom in the United States, which it says is caused by systematic attacks on journalists under the Trump administration.
Particulièrement inquiétante. La parole politique sous Donald Trump contre les journalistes est complètement débridée. Vous avez des injures à répétition contre les reporters, vous avez une délégitimation du travail des journalistes, vous avez aussi un définancement délibéré des médias publics, que ce soit les médias publics nationaux ou internationaux américains. Bref, tout ça dresse un paysage qui est particulièrement sombre et qui explique que les États-Unis aient dévissé de 7 places dans le classement mondial de la liberté de la presse.
RSF states that while EU member states retain their leading positions in the index, partly thanks to the recent European Media Freedom Act, Some EU countries remain in breach of the legislation.
Belgium is planning to take control of all nuclear power plants in the country. The federal government is currently negotiating with French energy group ENGIE, which currently owns and manages all nuclear activity in Belgium. The move comes in an effort by Brussels to secure control of its own energy supplies. On social media platform X, Prime Minister Bart De Wever said the Belgian government chooses, quote, safe, affordable and sustainable energy and wants to transition away from fossil fuels. Currently, only 2 out of the country's 7 reactors remain active. De Wever has pushed back against the closure of the 2 remaining power plants and even seeks to reopen decommissioned ones. ENGIE, however, opposes that idea. The energy giant instead wants to invest in wind, solar, batteries, and gas-powered stations. The negotiations are expected to conclude in October, but until then, De Wever said that the plans to decommission nuclear operations in Belgium, which had been initiated by ENGIE, are now on hold.
Authorities in the Netherlands say the recruitment of army reservists in the country has seen a significant boost amid commitments of the Dutch government to raise military personnel from its current 80,000 to 120,000 by 2035. The recent enlistment by the country's queen and her eldest daughter as reservists look to be helping, with authorities now scrambling to arm and train new recruits.
We have more application than we can handle because we have a lack of training capacity, a lack of housing. You have to give them all uniforms, you have to give them weapons, you have to give them the training, you need space to train. So that are the difficulties at the moment, but it's a luxury problem, I say.
According to the State Secretary for Defense, Dirk Boswick, there are about 9,000 reservists in the Netherlands, and recruiters aim to have at least 20,000 in 2030. The recruitment drive reflects moves across Europe to expand and modernize militaries, as leaders warily eye the grinding war launched by Russia against Ukraine and the disenchantment expressed by US President Donald Trump with the NATO alliance.
Activists on board the global Samud flotilla say Israeli forces intercepted more than 20 of their boats in international waters near the Greek island of Crete. The group said soldiers carrying guns boarded the ships and, quote, kidnapped activists at gunpoint, damaged engines and communications devices. The Israeli Foreign Ministry later announced that its forces had arrested 175 activists from more than 20 boats, adding that they're now making their way back to Israel, quote, peacefully. The interceptions began in the early hours of Thursday, more than 600 nautical miles from the coast of Gaza. Representatives of the group called the act a flagrant violation of international law and denounced the arrests in international territory, which Israel holds no jurisdiction over. The group also said that some boats were damaged and left stranded at sea, and it remains unclear whether Israeli forces left any activists on board those vessels. The flotilla was carrying aid and was aiming to break the Israeli naval blockade of Gaza and shed light on the plight of the Palestinian people. Activists say they remain committed to sailing to Gaza despite what they described as Israeli harassment. Israel has previously described the flotilla as a political provocation with alleged ties to Hamas, a characterization the group has rejected. In a classified location in the Mediterranean Sea, off the coast of Ramatouel, French authorities made a miraculous discovery. At a depth of 2,500 meters lies Camara 4, the deepest shipwreck ever discovered in French waters. It's a 16th century vessel, which was located in 2025 during a seabed survey operation conducted by the military. It was an exceptional discovery for Operation Calliope 26, a mission conducted jointly by Cefismer, a unit of the French Navy, and the Department of Underwater and Submarine Archaeological Research of the Ministry of Culture.
L'objectif pour nous, c'est bien que cette position reste secrète, parce qu'aujourd'hui, il y aura plusieurs missions qui sont amenées à être refaites pour évaluer sur un long terme, sur un temps long, en fait, le vestige, comprendre pourquoi elle a coulé ici, ses caractéristiques et faire aussi du prélèvement de mobilier pour avoir des informations complémentaires suite à cette découverte.
The tugboat used for this operation is equipped with a remotely operated underwater vehicle capable of descending up to 4,000 meters. The vehicle also had several cameras and articulated arms to retrieve items.
Donc on va prendre toute une série de clichés qui se superposent les uns aux autres et qui vont être remontés grâce à un traitement photogrammétrique, ce qui va nous permettre de générer une ortho-image, donc un plan complet de l'épave, et aussi un modèle 3D sur lequel on va pouvoir faire des mesures et aller prendre le calibre des barres de fer, aller prendre la longueur de l'ancre, la dimension des canons. Tout ça, ce sont des éléments de base qui vont nous servir à collecter toute la documentation de l'épave.
Hundreds of pictures and richly decorated plates were discovered, some of which were collected for analysis once back on land. At the agency's laboratory in Marseille, the ceramics were gently cleaned by professionals.
Là, l'objet qu'on tient entre les mains, effectivement, c'est l'un des objets les plus profonds pris sur les épaves aujourd'hui en France.
A temporary exhibition is planned at the Musée de la Marine in Toulon next November to showcase the mission's findings to the general public. The wreck, meanwhile, will remain on the seabed to comply with the conservation guidelines recommended by UNESCO.